Welcome to Open Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Black Lives Matter Greater New York has expanded their activism with the Black Opportunities Movement, aka Black Ops, a policy platform supported by the Black Act, a local, state, and federal policy framework to advance solutions and build strong Black communities. Joining us now to share more is Chivona Newsome, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York and the Black Opportunities Movement. Chivona, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure having you here.
Likewise, I'm happy to be back. Hello, everyone in the Bronx.
Yes. Thank you for always showing love and coming back to where Black Lives Matter Greater
The
New York
X
started,
forever.
the
Forever.
X. So before we start, Shavana, can you tell us more about the Black Ops movement for folks who are not familiar?
I want to give you guys a small history of it. So, we've been operating as Black Lives Matter Greater New York for the last about 5 years. When George Floyd died, our world shifted. The whole world shifted. But as leaders, we always have to be thinking about the next steps. So, we went out to Minneapolis the first 48 hours. And when we got back, instead of just taking to the streets as everyone else did for months and months, we did a think tank. We literally, the whole team, locked ourselves in to one of our members' homes and we wrote policy. And we announced those policies going on a year ago on June 7th. So coming out of that is more than policy, it's about mutual aid. The real part of it is because we see here in the Bronx, as we can see around the world, no one's coming to save us. So this program has expanded to Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. What we'll be covering today is the policy, but it's going to be Black economics. It's going to be helping each other. And it's also going to be a little bit of policing our communities as the Black Panther Party did to ensure our safety.
Right. And Shavana, your most recent law enforcement reform policy in the Black Act is actually titled the Blue Wall Law. What exactly is it? Can you help us break it down?
Absolutely. And it's short and simple. The same way if I went and applied for some kind of government aid or if I wrote on my tax forms wrong, I can be liable. I can go to jail. So the blue wall law is geared at breaking down that blue wall of silence. As we know, the NYPD and other law enforcements, they operate as a gang. They have a strict no snitch policy, which is similar to that of La Costa Nostra or stronger than any cartel that we could possibly name in this segment. So what we're going to do is what we're pushing for is for officers who falsify police documents will be prosecuted and imprisoned for 1.5 to 3 years. So pretty much they lie in reports. It happens. As we see, we just had a win. This was a very small case. Ryan Wilson, he hung himself. This just came out in the Daily News yesterday, about a week ago. Sorry, it came out about a week ago in the Daily News. Ryan Wilson hung himself in Manhattan, the Tombs, as we know it in the Bronx. He hung himself in the Tombs, and the inmates were crying out for help. Help him, help him. An officer came, looked, said, "Oh, he's just playing around," while he's literally hanging. And
Mm.
then the captain, who was just indicted a week ago, she falsified the reports. So
Mm.
now she is being charged with negligent homicide and falsifying police reports. So we just want to do that across the board. And not only for NYPD, because they are the third most funded military in the world, but the things we do here in New York, the laws that we get passed on a state and local level, they change the whole country, as we see an ending qualified immunity is spread to Mexico and other parts of the nation.
Right. And thank you, Shavana, for giving us that background. And as your organization, Black Lives Matter Greater New York, also advocated for several other pieces of legislation, as we know, including the repeal of 50A. Can you share those other laws with us and also emphasize what the 50A is as well for the
Not a
folks that
problem.
don't
And I'll start with 58. That is releasing police's misconduct, meaning if they harm someone, if they have a history of police brutality, those records used to be sealed. Imagine your job hiding everything you do in a possible lawsuit. So now police misconduct records are available to the public. That's the first thing we got passed. This came out in the Say Her Name Act early June last 2020. Governor Cuomo signed an executive order for our bills. Most of our legislation, to be honest, it doesn't come through the politicians who the police unions fund their who the police unions fund their political campaign. It's usually signed off with an executive order. The next one, if your audience goes to the website Black Opportunities, the first bill we have is the I Can't Breathe Act. That was actually passed under the Andrew Kearse Act, who was a man we worked with his family. The police allowed him for 17 minutes to call out, "I can't breathe," and he died in the back of a police car. Next, the chokehold ban is something we also got passed, which has been banned in most police handbooks for years. But as we've seen with Eric Garner, that isn't so. So that's a strong law. Next, we got introduced in the last month the Elected Civilian Complaint Review Board, because police brutality needs to be properly investigated and officers need to be prosecuted. So finger crossed that one happens. Qualified immunity. I know I'm giving you guys a lot in a little bit of time, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Qualified immunity means if an officer harms, kills you or your family, you can sue him. You will own that home, those little boats they like to buy. He will lose his pension. So our New York City Council has also ended that. So those are and lastly, a special prosecutor. We've seen an AG, Letitia James, say that the police brutality of the past year, the past summer, how we were getting beat up. I've been personally beaten with batons by law enforcement. Those will be investigated by a special prosecutor, because anyone in the Bronx knows the DA's office works very, very close with law enforcement. So how could there be unbiased in the prosecution of these officers?
Right. And Chivona, that's referring to the June 4th protest here in the Bronx, no?
Yeah, right
That we
on.
do.
And my neighbors, like I'm in the Bronx today, my neighbors who are scientists and engineers, they took to the streets. They were beaten and kettled in, like we've all seen those videos. So that's just to protect everybody in the community who's taking the stand. And the Bronx has been going hard for a very long time against injustice.
Right. And Chivona, you mentioned community policing. Does Black Ops eventually seek to replace current law enforcement and the NYPD?
Um, Actually, Black Ops, we are abolitionists. With our tactical team and the people who are going to be policing, we will not directly be policing in such a large amount. It would be more of community policing for us, but we do need to dismantle the police force because clearly it isn't working. Crime is going up. It continues to go up. And what people need to know in the Bronx is when you hear about gun control is racist. It became an issue once Black people became armed. If you want to stop the murder in your community, the robbery and crimes of opportunity, let me give you guys a little bit of facts. Communities that have the highest rates of murder have the highest rates of unemployment. So if our government wanted to stop crime, they would invest in our community. And that's what abolishing the police is. That means having mental health workers. Because let's be real, living in trauma and poverty, it causes something to happen to our psyches. In addition to people who are plagued with other mental illnesses, that means having social workers in school. Most of the things that police respond to are not crimes that someone carrying a gun would need to do. We need a holistic approach. So when I scream defund the police or abolish police, I know that if I close every precinct tomorrow, that wouldn't stop the current state we are living in. We have to do a complete holistic approach, the same way that the system has had a holistic approach in oppressing us.
And if you can break that down, Chivona, what will community control and the community protecting itself look like down the line? What will it mean for Bronxites in particular?
This is going to be a challenge. Bronxites have to step up. You have to make a conscious decision to know that enough is enough. And the worst thing they did to us was telling us that we didn't have power. You see it in other communities where they have their own ambulances, they have their own schools, and they have their own police force. So that would mean community policing, taking an active role in your community. And right now, gun laws are being challenged. New York State gun laws are being challenged in the last week and a half or so, for New York State specifically. But in states where you are licensed to carry, as I am licensed to carry in most states, in many states, about 30, our Black Ops people will patrol the community with guns. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but it worked quite well for the Black Panther Party. My tactical trainer uses this scenario because you're like, people are going to have guns against the cops. America and China don't really have a problem because they're equally armed and it allows them to come to a peaceful resolution. Right now, we are powerless. Black people are disproportionately affected by police brutality. And if we had people in our community who took a stand and say, no, in the case of George Floyd, I have a gun too. You are not going to put your knee on the neck of George Floyd, or who could step in for Eric Garner, we'd see a difference in the way the police handled us.
Right. And Siobhan, I have to ask you, what were your thoughts during the Derek Chauvin case, the verdict? Do you feel like it's accountability? What's your feeling?
Okay, see, I'm going to be to the far left of what the activists are saying because I look at this. We study art of war in our teachings at Black Ops. We study war strategies, and we're a very strategic activist group. That's why you see so many pieces of legislation. That's how you see how we work media and spread messaging. So I took George Floyd's murder, which was when we got the verdict about roughly 2 weeks ago. I took it as a joy. I rejoice because being an activist for so long, victories don't come often. Now, was I delusional to think that that victory would end systemic oppression and police brutality? No, but we just accomplished the impossible. And what I mean by the impossible is in the last 6 years, since 2015, 16,000 people have been murdered by law enforcement nationally. Only 8 people have been convicted, and
Right.
not on all counts. So anyone like the Bronxites who went out to Mont Haven and protested on June 4th, to every single person who put up any post on their social media, celebrate this victory, and it should start a fire in you to keep going. Now that I know I can accomplish that, the other 20 pieces of legislation and eradicating poverty, I know that we can change those too. So I was very happy about the verdict of Chauvin.
Right. And before we go, Chivona, how can people learn more about Black Ops and read the Black Act? I'll also just stay in touch with the movement.
Right on. Blackopportunities.com. It's pretty cut and dry. It has every single act. Follow BLM Greater NY on social media, and I'm at New York Bonnie. And our thing is about educating our people. Yes, we fight for our people, but they have to know about the laws that get passed so they can hold elected officials accountable. Maybe it'll inspire more people to run for city council and local office. We have to be accountable and do the research. I know that it's a lot in this COVID era.
Right.
That's why we're calling for cancel the rent in the Black Act. It's a lot to ingest and to take in, but you have to be conscious. We have to get informed, and that's the only way our people in the Bronx can overcome. Like the days of us being last and being beaten and shackled by poverty and oppression are gone. Everyone just we have to keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Chivona, for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Likewise, I love you guys. Have a great one.
Chivona Newsome is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Greater New York and the Black Opportunities Movement. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.